Hello, my name is Ian Watson, and I'm a Director Emeritus of the American Membrane Technology Association, or AMTA. The interview you're about to see is the 26th in a series of what we call Chats with the Pioneers. AMTA is a technical association founded on the advocacy of the use of membrane technology for water treatment, from membrane filtration, wastewater reclamation, to seawater desalination. The heart of this technology is the membrane itself. About 2.5 years ago, our board of directors decided to preserve the history of membrane and membrane system development. The association should make an effort to record these chats with those responsible for launching what is now a technology in common use throughout the world. AMTA's intent is to make segments of these chats available on its website, so that a new generation of engineers and scientists can understand the efforts of these pioneers to help solve some of the issues facing the world today. With me, I have Mr. Sidney Johnson and Mr. Melvin Liu, both of whom worked at the Office of Saline Water. I will ask Sid, if he would, to give us a brief introduction, introduce himself and his background.
Okay, my name is Sidney Johnson. I grew up in Indiana, enlisted in the Naval Air Corps. I was an officer candidate for 32 months. They thought I was an excellent officer candidate, but had the good sense not to make me an officer. When I got out of the Navy, I went back to Indiana and went to Purdue University. Got a PhD in inorganic chemistry from Professor Herbert C. Brown, who went on to get a Nobel Prize. I had nothing to do with the work that he got the Nobel Prize for, but he was a very interesting person to work for and was one of the highlights of my life. My first job was with a very small company who Herbert C. Brown was a consultant for, named Metal Hydrides. Worked with rocket fuels when rockets were a big item, to send a man to the moon, et cetera, et cetera. Had some personnel problems with my boss at Metal Hydride, so joined the government with the Office of Saline Water. I was a branch chief in surface chemistry, and I became a division chief for something they called applied science, and I was supposed to be a bridge between research, who understood esoteric research, and the engineers who understood engineering. And I didn't understand either one of them, so they made me the bridge between them. I was very interested in the freezing process and later membranes, including reverse osmosis. And one of my regrets is there was a process called piezodialysis, which was sort of a cross between electrodialysis and reverse osmosis. You use pressure to force salt through the membranes rather than water. And this has some interesting implications, because if you have a small leak, you lose a little bit of water into the salt stream. Whereas in reverse osmosis, if you have a small leak, you get salt into your product. Had a lot of theoretical advantages that made it quite interesting. And, you know, we did get membranes that express salt through them rather than water. But we needed much higher flux rates. And the way to do that would be to make the membranes thinner. I think everybody agreed to that, but we got bogged down in achieving that. So that was a disappointment. The other disappointment with my desalting career, I had affinity on theoretical basis for the freezing process. And the major problem there is that for whatever reason, we had a hard time separating the different functions of freezing so we could test one function. Whenever we wanted to try something new, we built a whole new pilot plant for freezing, and sometimes what we really wanted to test wasn't the problem. It was some other component.
Right.
So, reverse osmosis, if you want to try a new membrane, the equipment's pretty much the same. You just have to have some sort of new membrane, but with freezing, it's harder to do that, and our execution was poor. We should have designed something where if we wanted to test a new wash column, we could just test the new wash column, but we put in a whole new pilot plant. And did you ever interview Frank Leitz at the Bureau of Reclamation?
We did.
Yeah. Well, I think he probably knows more about piezo-dialysis than anybody else in the world. And I sponsored Frank before he went to the Bureau of Reclamation. And the Office of Saline Water got abolished, as you know, and we became part of the Office of Water Research and Technology, which pretty much had an antagonistic attitude towards desalting. I think the second day we were there, they declared us all excess personnel. They had no useful reason for, and then they abolished that, trying to send a message to us, I think.
That was a relatively short period of time, wasn't it?
Yes.
Like a couple of years only.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then I went to the Bureau of Reclamation, and which, interestingly enough, before there was an Office of Saline Water, there was a desalting group in the Bureau of Reclamation.
Right.
And Ernie Savico, he's the only person I know of that came.
Yeah, it was Ernie Savica, and then we found out when we interviewed the folks in San Diego that David Furukawa had also worked there at the Bureau of Reclamation in desalting.
Yeah, that sounds.
Yes. In fact, he was the head of that group about the time when the Office of Saline Water shut down.
Right.
It's a big old line agency, so.
It's still there.
I know it's still there, but it was easy to abolish the Office of Saline Water, which I thought was one of the best programs in the whole government, to tell you the truth. Yeah. And it wasn't hard to abolish the Office of Water Research and Technology, but you can't abolish the Bureau of Reclamation. It's just
Right.
Tentacles are all over the place. And
That's right.
so, and then I finished my career with the Geological Survey, and they also are an old line agency, and you can't abolish them. They do some good work, but I don't think it ever was a very cost-efficient thing. Why don't you let Mel talk a while?
All right. Mel?
Okay, my name is Melvin Liu. I was born and raised in New York City. I went to City College in New York and got a bachelor's of chemical engineering. And my first job opportunity, I was with the Navy at the Naval Ordnance Station, where I made solid propellant for various air-to-air or air-to-ground missiles. In those days, they weren't composite propellants, but they were extruded grains of nitrocellulose and nitroglycerin. And spent 4 years there. And I responded to an ad in the paper, and I took an interview with China Pasapa in the membranes group. And I did do some work on electrodialysis when I was in college, along with explosives. So I got hired there, and the original group there was China Pasapa, Ernie Savica, Mel Matson, myself, Milt Mintz. There were some other people that joined the group later on when we were getting close to being closed out. But I did mainly a lot of the field work, and my first introduction to the 3 RFPs, the designs that we were sponsoring, tubular, plate and frame. The tubular, I believe, was American Standard. The plate and frame design was Aerojet, and the spiral module was Gulf General Atomics. I think I went to Roswell, and my first hands-on experience with those 3 concepts. The Bureau was our field people, and Charlie Mason, I believe, was my contact. I believe he was Larry Hogsted's boss. And at that time, you could really, at the beginning, you could really see the advantages of the spiral wound membrane. In my opinion, at that time, DuPont was working on the hollow fine fiber, which I felt was a very good design, but the spiral wound and the hollow fine fiber were my favorite for desalting brackish water, not other applications. The drawbacks when I first got to handle the spiral wound module was it used glass beads in the product collection chamber, which meant you had to handle the things carefully, like a 5-inch 54 round in a naval gun. But Dick Sudak and the guys did a very good job of improving the design with their sailcloth and Vexar backing material, which over the years became the thing that moved forward. So I spent a lot of time. I did some field work. We had a mobile demonstration facilities that was, we sent out for 4 or 5 month period testing along the Colorado River Basin. And we set up a number of mobile sites just to demonstrate the capability of the 4 designs at Fort Morgan, Grand Junction, La Junta, Colorado, Hurricane, Utah, Las Vegas Wash on Lake Mead, and some in Yuma. I can't think exactly where in Yuma, but that was a very hot place to work. And the biggest mobile facility we had was one designed by Kaiser. You know, all this work was done on contracts with these various folks. But I ended up doing a lot of field work with the people on hand with these people at these locations. And of course, as Sid mentioned, you know, I spent 6 years at the Office of Saline Water until they kind of wrapped it up on us. But the feeling at that time was we had done our job. You know, our reverse osmosis was commercialized. And prior to the closeout, Dow Chemical had some patents, and they responded to our RFP for a large module development program, which we call the quantum module, which I thought was a very good concept. What its advantage was the fact that the DuPont design, the feed water flowed from the center to the perimeter, which meant that the velocity of the brackish water in the vessel was, and the Reynolds numbers was decreasing as you went from the center to the outside. Dow Chemical design, the feed, brackish water feed came in from the perimeter and flowed to the collection in the center of the vessel, which tried to maintain the Reynolds number and the velocity over the fibers. And they also set it up where they tightly wound the thing so that maintain their position in the module and not shift it, because we found in a lot of the field work that the DuPont's design that there was some movement when they in the fibers. And as you know, with the fibers, if you get any RO design, if you get any dead spots where all of a sudden you didn't get any flow and your concentration polarization on the membrane surface decreased, that you would get your calcium salts building up. And once that happened, it was like a cement block after a while. So that, unfortunately, that DuPont project didn't go any further because we didn't have any more money to support it. So when the office shut down, I ended up going back to Indian Head, the Naval Ordnance Station, for 6 years. And I was in a different type of role, in-service engineering and logistics support. I did a lot of support work for the Harpoon missile system and was the logistics representative for NavAir for foreign navies. In other words, we marketed the Harpoon missile to the various navies out there. And for some reason, there was a reinsurgent with the Office of Water Research and Technology on the engineering side. So Mel Madsen gave me a call, and so I came back, and Walter Barnes, I believe, hired me. Unfortunately, he's passed away too, yeah. And Will Hahn is also gone. And in fact, of the original group from the membranes group, I think I'm the last one sitting.
Yep, I think you're right.
So I got back. It must have been my luck, because as soon as I got back there and started working and trying to do engineering on the desalting and membrane processing, we had a problem with funding again. And I ended up doing, most of my stuff was closing out contracts and shutting down facilities. And fortunately, what was left, they transferred us to the Bureau of Reclamation, which was a continuation of closing down because life wasn't that great. And they passed the Water Resources Research Act of 19, you remember that, Sid? And so therefore there was a funding for 2 programs, a research grant program, and what was the other one? You don't remember?
Don't remember.
And for some reason they decided they would pick us right out of the Bureau of Reclamation and send us over to the U.S. Geological Survey, the Water Resources Division. And I was a grant coordinator for the Water Resources Research Grants, which we went out, requested grants, and we would, I guess, get a number like 300 grants. Grants come in, and we would only fund about 10 or 20, 30 of them. So, but that
they didn't primarily relate to desalting.
No,
just
not at all.
Bunch of crap. Edit that out, please.
No, we'll probably leave that in.
We funded maybe 5% of the grants that came in, and I don't recall anything that was related to membrane technology at all. And that program died in '92. And so they, all of a sudden, I ended up in the, more or less the safety side of the Water Resources Division. I was the Water Resources Safety Manager until I retired. And I guess they felt that since I worked with nitroglycerin and all that good stuff, that they found a place to park me to take care of their safety program.
He's a good man to have on the safety side.
So that's roughly where I am.
When you started the membrane program, I guess Dr. Chanapasapa was the driving force behind the membrane program.
He was the I'm trying to think of the title. Membrane Process Division, was it?
Something like that.
Yeah, he was the head of the division.
I have some trouble with describing him as the driving force. He was very aggressive. He was good at promoting his point of view, and which I generally disagreed with.
Well, he got the funding for the program.
No, he did. He did. He got funding. Yeah. Misspent it, but got the funding.
Well, let's put it this way. No, that's, I obviously I have thoughts on that, because for desalting brackish water, obviously the two concepts that I supported, because I felt was the best, was the hollow fine fiber and the spiral wound. And we did spend money on the plate and frame and tubular, which, was like, well, it wasn't that efficient.
He was aggressive. He did get money. He, in my opinion, was not the sharpest tack in the box, but where was it? Roswell. They had some sort of facility there. Mel would know better than I would.
Well, we had a facility in Chula Vista also.
They had problems with membranes getting chewed up by bugs, so he postulated that there was a Roswell strain that
just loves cellulose acetate.
Yeah, cellulose acetate, and they were trying to organize research on the Roswell strain, and finally somebody said, "Do you have bugs in your carbon pre-filter or something?" And it turned out that it was the pre-treatment was introducing the bugs rather than.
Well, we found that we needed pre-treatment to make it work. So
that's for sure.
Not to be part of the interview, but China was an unusual cookie, and the one thing I did learn from him very strongly, I learned how not to be a supervisor. Because I did, when I was in the Navy, I spent 6 years, and I supervised several groups there, and up to 18 people. But his knack with working with people was out of the ordinary. But
well, he was a character, and he was a force, and I worked in research, and the head of research was some guy named Sherm Gillen, and China used to do things that drove Sherm Gillen wild. How does he get away with that, and how does he do that? And China said, well, Sherm Gillen gets away with it. If he can get away with it, I can get away with it. So, China was right. Sherm got away with all kinds of crap that he shouldn't. So Sherm was sort of his model, and it drove Sherm wild. Why are they letting China do all this stuff?
Well, China also drove Pat O'Mara crazy too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. How did the membrane program get started at OSW?
Well, my version is that there was a desalting program in the Bureau of Reclamation, and there were a couple of people in Congress that believed in desalting, and they were dissatisfied at the enthusiasm or lack thereof in the Bureau of Reclamation. And so they started up the Office of Saline Water as an independent agency. And, you know, when I joined, which was, God, 53 maybe. Is that right? At any rate, I think the budget for the Office of Saline Water was about $2.5 million. And, you know, we did great work and research, a lot of the small contracts too. And they didn't have boilerplate. They typed up the contracts, and they had a lot of typos in them and, and so forth. And but nobody, you know, it was a best effort basis. And the boilerplate, nobody paid any attention to it, I guess. And so, you know, then, you know, John F. Kennedy gave a speech, and, you know, I think some junior clerk wrote in a line about desalting, and said desalting was more important than sending a man to the moon. Well, sending a man to the moon was, they were spending billions and billions of dollars in that. And so, you know, somebody told the Secretary of Interior, which was Udall, I think, at the time, I'm not sure.
Well, he was the secretary one time, but I'm not sure when.
They said, desalting is more important than sending a man into the moon. Did you know you were in charge of the desalting program? And hell, I didn't know that. And we were on a little converted apartment building on 16th Street. And like I say, the secretary didn't even know we existed. Moved us back to the main interior building so the secretary would know where we were.
Actually, we were under the secretary. Oh, I thought it was directly under the secretary.
I think that's true. He didn't know that though.
Oh.
We knew that, but he didn't know that.
He didn't know that, right?
And you know, the first director was Dr. somebody, can't remember his name, but he wasn't a PhD, he was an MD. And, you know, apparently he just, everybody liked him pretty well, and they had a very, very good program, spending about between $2 and $3 million a year. But then when this guy gave the speech, JFK gave the speech and said it was more important than spending a man to the moon, the Interior Department was surprised to find out that they were in charge of that, and they wanted to spend more money, and our budget went from $2.5 million to $25 million. And
it was the golden days of OSW.
yeah.
Well, as they split the money, they had, you know, they supported the various different concepts, including distillation. In fact, there was the tulip. What was the? They had a big project. They were supposed to on distillation, build an island somewhere.
Balsa
Island. Yeah.
Well, you know, that was.
Then the other thing that I remember from the thermal side was they tried to develop the universal plant design. You remember that?
Yeah.
I remember kind of recalling that, but
And
that was
their
another
goal
division.
was $1 1,000 gallons. The only way they could get that was to make it out of carbon steel, which of course lasted about 6 weeks.
Yeah, no, they.
Well, on the membrane side, it was started when they went out for the request for proposals for design concepts. And that's when we got the three.
No, that was at that time was was Loeb and Surarajan working on the membrane program at UCLA?
He was working on the membranes, but I'm not too sure. I kind of recall him working for he was a professor in a Canadian college.
Well, Surarajan was Canadian,
Yeah.
but he was a graduate student at UCLA when they were doing
UCLA,
that
yeah,
work.
no.
Yeah, but I think he went back.
He went back to Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and he became head of the Canadian National Research Center or something like that.
I don't remember that.
But
That was in
but
the late 60s.
Ulrich
I
Merton
think.
told us a story about how they became interested. General Atomics became interested. Apparently, his boss one day called him in and said, and Ulrich, as you know, is a nuclear engineer.
Yeah.
Called him in one day and said, "There's this fellow, Sid Loeb, up at UCLA, is doing some work in membranes for water treatment." He said,
Yeah.
"Why don't you go up there and talk to him?" So Ulrich tells a story. He went up and spent a day with Sid Loeb. He came back, reported back to his boss, and the boss said, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Why don't you write a proposal somewhere and see if we can get funding?" So he did, and that was their first effort, I guess.
Yep. And they were certainly one of the better groups that we funded.
Yeah, they were really good.
They had very, very good people.
Yeah.
Very good people.
You mentioned piezodialysis,
Yeah.
and that periodically it comes up. And same with freezing. I was at a conference about 3 years ago, not a conference, but a kind of a seminar. And I was talking to a guy, and he was a farmer,
Yeah.
actually. And he'd got interested in the freezing process somehow, and was working on the freezing
It's
process.
got a lot of inherent advantages, and freezing and piezodialysis are my two big regrets that I didn't advance them more than I was able to. So, but you know, when I joined, who was the labor union guy that was head of OSW? Fred McGowan.
Well, that is a name from OSW.
Yeah, he was head, and his background was he was head of some union. So, and they became when they went from 2.5 million to 25 million, they wanted some more dynamic person than Fred McGowan, and they got Frank DeLuzio, who was with the AEC,
Right.
and the Atomic Energy Commission was interested in taking over desalting. They had some guy named, anyhow, he had a slideshow, and he said, you know, what desalting needs is really, 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 really cheap energy. And we're going to build huge duplexes, nuclear plants. And he had a slideshow, and he had a nuclear plant on the edge of a desert by the ocean. And there was green growing all around. And and you know, nuclear energy was going to be so cheap that it wouldn't make economic sense to have a meter. You'd just pay a flat $10 a month for all the energy you wanted, you know, because it was going to be that cheap. And this guy, Phil Hammond, he went all over the world with this slide dog and pony show. And, you know, it was amazing. Just a lot of people believed this crap, you know.
Oh, and they still do. They still do. There's an active program in Vienna, the International Atomic Energy Authority, that promotes nuclear desalination.
Yeah.
Even today.
Even today,
Yeah.
you know, they have having trouble selling it for lighting up light bulbs.
That's right. That's right.
You know, I don't know. But at any rate, and you know, I was amazed when I met Phil Hammond. I thought he would be a dynamic fireball and so forth, but he was really a rather quiet, reserved guy. I couldn't believe that he could sell that crap, but but he did, and you know, when Fred McGowan, they pushed him out, and they got a guy, Frank DeLuzio, who had been with the AEC, and Frank knew his way around, and he said, the AEC is not going to take us over. He says, you know, I know, I can get consultants to support any position I want. And he knew, and he could, you know, he knew how to, he knew people, if he wanted to support one position, he knew who to get to support that position, and not to get somebody that was opposed. He knew who would oppose it, and he was good at that. He was good at that.
And he was there for what, 3-4 years?
Something like
Yeah.
that.
And then Pat O'Meara came in.
Well, Pat didn't become the director till almost the ending days of OSW. We had Chung Ming Wong in between. And,
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
And the one before Chung Ming Wong was engineering guy. You remember his name? No.
He was in between DeLuzio and
Chung Ming Wong.
Chung Ming Wong.
Chung Ming Wong was on the.
I don't remember.
Pat got replaced Chung Ming Wong when we almost was getting our shutdown orders.
Yeah.
I can't remember who was before Chung Ming Wong. It was kind of thought there was someone engineering background, I think.
Yeah, I don't
I
remember.
don't remember.
I'd forgotten those names until you mentioned them. I
Too
remember
many names
Chung Ming
passing
Wong.
through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But DeLuzio was dynamic, and you know, he's the guy that promoted Bullseye, and you got to be dynamic to support something like that. And you know, God, they did a lot of work, drew up all kinds of plans and blah 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 blah. And you look at the problem Japan had building one 2 miles away from the ocean.
You mentioned the Dow quantum module. I actually saw one
They built
down
two.
in Florida.
They built two of them.
They built 2 of them? I saw
Before
one
they-
down in Florida.
Lost out the money.
And that was shortly before they purchased Filmtech.
Yes, right.
And do you know why they suddenly decided to abandon the hollow fiber?
I was gone already.
You were gone by then, yeah.
I was my pet project, and we had no money. I think that contract.
Filmtech, wasn't that the North Star?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the Dow Chemicals one was that contract for the development of that large module was the largest contract the membranes division ever awarded. But we were only talking about a couple $1 million. That's like one missile. But it was a case of we didn't have money, and I guess they didn't get any more support to continue the work. But they did build 2.
Yeah.
And I try to think of where they tested it, but I don't
There was one at, the one I saw was at a place called Venice Gardens in Florida, which had Dowix hollow fiber membranes in it, and they took it down there as a test. But they were doing quite well with the hollow fiber, the Dowix design.
Yeah,
And
I
I
thought
was
so.
surprised when they suddenly
I have no idea what
Disappeared.
was the reason.
Bought Film Tech and went the flat sheet route.
The company did not support it.
Yeah.
Obviously, they couldn't get any money out of us, but.
Well, I had heard that they never moved the Dowix group out of research and development. It was always a research and development project.
Yeah.
So,
Weren't
anyway.
you a consultant on the patent that Film Tech got?
No, you're talking about the membrane?
Yeah.
My involvement there was with U.S. Geological Survey when, I'm trying to think who sued Film Tech, because to my knowledge, because this was a time period when I was with the Navy, Film Tech had a contract with Office of Water Research and Technology, and they were working on that membrane, FT30 membrane, and somehow they patented, and they held the patent. And what happened was, I'm not sure which company, but one of the other companies took them to court saying that patent didn't belong to them because it was supported by government contracts.
Yeah, well, Dow, this was after Dow had purchased Film Tech.
Yeah.
Dow sued Hydronautics and Fluid Systems for patent infringement. And so they both countersued and said, well, we can't infringe a patent that you don't hold. And eventually it was settled in favor of the government.
Because it was the U.S. Geological Survey became the owner of the patent.
Didn't you get Joe McCutcheon to testify or something like that?
I didn't. The survey did. Well, actually, I think it was Fluid Systems that got him to testify because they took the lead on that case.
Yeah.
And we ended up being the recipient of the patent. And the policy of the survey was to try to get as much money on that one. So we we charged for licensing fee. I know Richard Sudak called me up after that all happened, and he was Membrane Systems at that time. Richard, was he?
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, "Do you think it's worth it if we get a license?" And I said, "Not really."
If Dow doesn't have the patent, they're not going to pump a lot of money into it if they've got the patent. And it's like Frank DeLuzio said, you can find an expert to support any opinion. And
well, a lot they called everybody. I mean, there was.
And I think they got Joe McCutcheon.
Even I was deposed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I have a somewhat different opinion. I think you can make a case on either side. And if you say it belongs to the government, anybody can use it and nobody's going to put a lot of private capital into it because, so I think the industry would have been better off if they had supported Dow's. I think their position was a little shaky, to tell you the truth, but decided that anybody can use it, so people are going to rush in and use it. That is a fallacious one for the most part. If anybody can use it,
there were 4 companies in the U.S. manufacturing thin film composite membranes.
Yeah.
So you're going to license it 4 times. That's not going to bring a whole lot of revenue.
Yeah. People have different opinions.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah.
We got some insight on that actually when we interviewed the North Star and Film Tech folks last month up in Minneapolis. It was interesting to learn how that whole process had proceeded in North Star and then how it transferred to Film Tech. And I guess that my recollection is that the lawsuit was finally settled because John Cadott had discovered a notebook, or he produced a notebook at deposition, which clearly he had started when he was at North Star, which described the underlying theory of the FT30 membrane. So it was done under contract to OSW.
Well, you know, Aerojet, they got lots of money, and there would be a week, and then they'd get a new contract. And that week in between is when they thought up all their ideas, you know, and they claimed it didn't belong to the government because...
well, that plate frame didn't go anywhere anyway.
But now Aerojet bought Envirogenics. Did Envirogenics do any membrane research under your auspices?
I'm not familiar.
I can't recall. I think the name's familiar, but I can't.
Yeah.
We had a number of contracts. I dealt mainly with Rigid Sudak.
Yeah.
And
Envirogenics was on the thermal side more.
yeah.
But they went into the membrane business and manufactured CA membranes for a while.
No, I don't recall them at all. So, because our distillation side was pretty big.
Yeah. Did you get involved at all in the Yuma project?
I knew a little bit about it. I was not personally involved.
Right.
No.
That was mainly Bureau.
It's mainly Bureau, but they said that they had received support from OSW.
Well, we had a mobile test site outside of Yuma, but it had nothing to do with that Yuma project, the desalting project.
Yeah.
I kind of recall having some conversations with the Bureau, but those were the fading days.
Yeah, right. Right.
So,
Right.
in fact, I believe politically there was some hope they kind of felt in the office that maybe they could get latched onto it, get
resurrect
saved.
it. Well, that was the argument that was made, at least politically, was that you had done such a good job commercializing both thermal and membrane technology. There was no further need for the Office of Saline Water.
That's what I recall. That was a coup de grace.
Yeah.
So.
Do you have any of your time there and the characters that you were working with there? Do you have a favorite story that you'd like to tell us?
I'll try to think of one. If you've got one, go ahead.
Well, I remember one time Pat O'Mara replaced Chung Ming Wong, and he had a dispute with China Pasapa, and I really can't remember what it was, but I was a third man in that meeting, and Pat would not talk straight to China Pasapa, and China would not talk to Pat. So they both would look at me, and we'd be yelling at each other in that meeting, and I said, wait a minute, guys, the dispute is between you two, not me. Let's quit it, because Pat and China really did not get along at all.
Yeah.
Well, China was very aggressive, and like I say, he drove Sherm Gillum, who was head of research, drive, although he actually patterned his modus operandi after Gillum, but Gillum couldn't stand that.
Right, right. What was the relationship between you guys and the membrane technology and the thermal guys? Was there like friendly competition?
I would say so.
Yeah, I didn't have any problems. We didn't have problems working together as a group, because we did set up test shops at their facilities, like Wrightsville Beach,
Right.
and Chula Vista.
Right.
So we did our thing, they did their thing, and we didn't butt heads. Now, higher ups might have, but not us working guys in the trenches.
Yeah.
Well, one reason research got got a lot of money was when the budget at the start of the fiscal year came in. Research was allocated so much, and development was allocated so much, and for whatever reason, development generally never spent all their money, so Sherm Gillum would say write up a bunch of contracts, And when development said they couldn't get all their money committed, the director would invariably give it to research, and he had all these contracts ready to go, and some of them were pretty bad, but you know, it was sort of a cardinal sin to return money to the government, which is why we're in the shape we are today, part I think. But so research got lots of money because development didn't spend all theirs, and it went on for years and years. I don't know why.
Well, I'll tell you, when we were in the Bureau of Reclamation, the reason we had money when we transferred over there is because development was conservative, and we held back on some of our money. And the reason being was we knew we had to protect some money for our salaries when the door closed. When we went over to the Bureau. So we tried not to waste the money on our side of the door.
Now, you've mentioned several names that have come back to me, most of whom are no longer with us, unfortunately. Walt Bynes and I were good friends, and continued that friendship after he left OSW.
Well, I was very shocked that, you know, both he and Will passed away.
They did, yeah.
Very shortly, to get a couple days apart.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I want to thank you, gentlemen, Sid Johnson and Mel Lou, for being here today and giving us a background of your time at OSW. Thanks very much.
It's been our pleasure, and we appreciate the invite. And I wish I could have been more lucid, but
you did great.
I'm 88 years old, and
well, you did great. You did great.
Going downhill.